Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit and welcome to this episode. I am so delighted, so honored to be sharing this episode with all of you. It is such a potent, magical conversation. I had my dear friends, colleagues, and teachers, Britten, LaRue, and Rebecca Padgett with me for this conversation, and I have to say, during the conversation, it felt like we opened a portal and we entered into it, we stepped into it, and it was magical and it was warm and it was loving and sparks were flying. So I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation. So before we get there, let me just kind of explain a little bit about why I had both of them on and and even share a little bit about my experience with that. So the three of us met in Charting Your Course, which was Britten's first astrological learning container in 2020. Charting Your Course has since been composted into the astrological learning container that Britten and I are currently facilitating, Astrology as Praxis. But Rebecca and I met there, and we were both one of Britten's first students, and we basically grew up together as astrologers. And so when Britten told me earlier this year that Rebecca is going to be the 13th reader for this year's The Magician's Table, I got super excited. So let me share a little bit about what The Magician's Table is and my experience going through the experience that is The Magician's Table. So officially, The Magician's Table is a workshop circle for emerging readers, and it is a 3-month container for personal growth, for community connection, for readers, intuitive magical practitioners to practice growing their tools. And The Magician's Table was really such a pivotal point for me because in 2021, I was the first 13th reader. And so if you are wondering what the 13th reader is, essentially it is a liminal role, I would say, where one gets to both facilitate, support, hold, and also at the same time have the experience of being held, being taught, and being mentored. And so each cohort of The Magician's Table has 13 people in it, 13 readers. And so the 13th reader kind of holds that space between holding the container for the participants and for Britten, who runs this offering, right? And so my experience being the 13th reader in 2021 was really the first time I had the chance to taste the possibility of me holding myself in the capacity of being a leader for a learning space. That experience was really healing for me because it helped me grow in my ability to read and to hold space for others during sessions, which became truly an invaluable practice. And honestly, giving readings is like one of my most favorite thing to do. So all of that really kind of started around the time that I was involved in The Magician's Table. And also what I think is so powerful about the experience was that I went through that not alone, but, in the holding, in the witnessing of the most loving, the most warm, and the most caring community of fellow practitioners who are also growing their skill sets and growing their awareness. And looking back, I would say that this was not conscious for me at that time, but being the 13th reader and kind of holding this liminal space of being the facilitator and the participant was the start of my own journey in more fully claiming my inner teacher, which in some ways, for me at least, it was kind of the missing piece, because I always identify as being a lifelong learner. I was always a very enthusiastic, a very voracious learner. But the truth is, right, the student and the teacher are not separate. They're not. The student and the teacher are really two sides of the same coin, right? And so without claiming both, without fully embracing both sides, whichever one you neglect ended up becoming a shadow, right? Essentially, it becomes the part of you that seeks to disconnect, and the part of you that is, for me at least, because I was really afraid of holding my own teacher frequency, I was always searching, I was always learning, and often I didn't always come from the energetics of true curiosity, right? And true love of learning, but from the energetics of like, I'm not enough, something is wrong with me, right? And so to me, being the 13th reader, my experience was that it was my first step in kind of claiming my power, which is so scary. And so one of the core tenets of the Magician's Table is this idea of emergence, right? Cultivating skills, cultivating awareness around emergence. And my experience is that we are always emerging, right? To be in this process of continual emergence is to be alive, right? Being alive means that you're never static. And so you're always ending one chapter and starting another, right? Starting one chapter and ending another. And so I think one of the most powerful gifts that I received from being a participant in the Magician's Table was this gift of holding myself compassionately with awareness, with skill, through the various stages of my emergence. And I believe that this conversation will be relevant for you, regardless of whether you are interested in becoming a practitioner or not, because all of us are always moving through, on a soul level, different stages of our emergence, right? And so, I invite you to listen to this conversation through the lens of feeling into that resonance, because something that's been coming up a lot in my field this past week actually is just how powerful this energy of emergence is in the collective at the moment. I'm really feeling it for myself and for many different members of my community. So I believe that there's something really powerful for you here. And I also wanted to make sure that I share this conversation before Venus leaves Pisces, because we talked about Venus and Venus is exalted in Pisces. So I wanted to make sure that all of you gets a chance to listen to this before Venus leaves Pisces. And if you happen to listen to this during Venus in Aries or Venus in other signs, that's also not a problem. But just know that we were kind of in that womb space of Venus in Pisces when we were having this conversation, which I think you can probably feel very viscerally. All right, so let me allow you to get into this conversation, and here is my conversation with Britten, LaRue, and Rebecca Padgett. Welcome to the podcast, Britten and Rebecca. It is such a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I am so excited for this conversation. I just knew it would be a blast when Britten told me that the two of you are going to be collaborating on the Magician's Table this year. And for listeners who don't know our backstory, which maybe is the majority of the listeners here, we all met through Britten's Charting Your Course, the first iteration of it in 2020. So the pandemic started, and then you started an astrology course, Britten, where both Rebecca and I were participants, and we were some of your first official students, I suppose.
Yay. Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we were babies.
I know, we totally were babies. And it's so beautiful to kind of look back and feel into our journey together and as individuals. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Yes, it was a small container and we got very close.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I kind of miss those days, actually. I mean, there were a lot going on in the world, but yeah. But I'm super excited to talk about both, the Magician's Table for this year, and yeah, some of the themes that are alive for you both as you are beginning to weave the energetics of the container. Yeah. So before we start, I thought I'd love both of you to introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners. Maybe start with your sun, moon, rising, and just anything that's alive for you with regards to who you feel yourself to be today and in this period of your life.
I'm Britten LaRue. I'm a Pisces sun, Capricorn moon, and Aries rising. And I am currently today in my Saturn opposition at age 44. So I feel like I'm in a intersection space right now where I'm really feeling a kind of harvest moment of noticing all these things I've been working on and building and tending, listening to and grappling with and letting go and letting in. Like, it just feels like in every department of my life right now, I'm just witnessing all that I've been up to, basically, in this kind of Saturn way. And the Magician's Table is something that I've built that I hold dearly and tend to. So it feels really special to be talking about that today. And I also am someone who holds other learning containers. I really love long-term containers with whoever wants to come play. I like transformation spaces, learning spaces, and that's also in one-on-one sessions with folks. And I also love long-term writing projects and building out language that I want to share with other people. And so right now, I'm in the midst of editing a manuscript to be published based on a series of workbooks that I put out all across 2020 that you both know. And so that feels very culminating and huge, since I just self-published those. I didn't really know what I was doing. And yeah, I'd say, what does it feel like to be in Saturn opposition? In many ways, it feels like having everything reflected back to me, so I feel more clear in what I'm doing. And that's a pretty wild experience for someone who's usually just like throwing things out to see what happens, not knowing.
Yeah. Wow.
So powerful. I'm also a mother of two girls, two teens, and that's a huge part of my life as well.
Thank you. How about you, Rebecca?
Well, okay. So, Virgo rising, Virgo sun, and Libra moon. Um, where am I in this time? So, for me, what's been coming up, I'm an artist, so there's a lot of birthing and new ideas that are coming up around my artistic practice. And I think what I'm working towards and on is actually creating the space and what kind of structure I want to have my life in, to have that more, you know, in the forefront with my work that I do as a reader. I also see people for one-on-one sessions, and I have some new offerings. I've been working with people one-on-one to actually build their own practices, and that relates to magical practices, but also their creative practice as well. So I'm really interested to see where those two spaces are merging and how to support people with creating that for their own lives. So that's a space that's really alive for me right now. And just creating more time for myself to really be choosing the next steps for me, and that feels really new and supportive.
Wow. Yeah. I love both your answers. It's so powerful. Like I could feel it landing in my body. Thank you. So just a little, context here. Other than the fact that we all met during Britten's Charting Your Course 2020, is you both are preparing for the next round of Magician's Table, which I would love to hear in your words what Magician's Table is and what it means to you. And the first iteration of Magician's Table was 2021, right, Britten?
Yes, spring.
Yeah. Spring 2021, and I was the 13th reader. And this round, Rebecca is going to be the 13th reader for the two cohorts you are doing, right? So I would love to have you both kind of introduce a little bit about what this offering is and what it's meant for you and how it's moved through you in your lived experience so far.
Yes. So at a kind of human logistical explanatory level, the magician, like, what is it? The Magician's Table is a 3-month, I would say, transformation container, as opposed to a learning container. It's more experiential, like each person's going through some kind of experience with themselves, whereby 13 individuals come into the space that I've set up to share their voice and to share their being with one another in circle. And we have weekly gatherings for the purpose of those shares. And what is shared depends on what's emerging for each person in that moment of what came up that week. And one of the things that happens in that week is that each of those 13 have a different partner where they meet for the purpose of sharing their gifts with the other to be supportive to them in some way. So it's like a gift sharing workshop. That's the magic. And so they practice giving and they practice receiving, each of the 13. And part of what's shared when we meet is, what was that like? What was it like to give, and what was it like to receive? Which usually brings up a lot for each individual. They're also sharing what came up in the curriculum that I offer, which is based on the elements of astrology. And each weekly invitation is to invite someone into reflection, into practices to help them hear their gifts and hold themselves through the confrontation with their gifts. And sometimes what comes up in the weekly shares is very internal, and it's about like container specific experiences. But as we know, everything is connected, and the internal world is connected to the outer world. And so sometimes what comes up comes from people's personal lives or professional lives that don't technically have to do with magic per se, but because everything is connected, the reverberations of the experience of being in the container show up through the shares as they will. And so a large part of the experience is naming what's present and then being witnessed. And it feels like a very potent space for those who go through it. And I was thinking about this, and I feel like in many ways, the Magician's Table to me feels like a medicine space in this like mycelial way of like, when you take mushrooms medicinally, you receive some kind of medicine that is just for you and is like appropriate for you where you are. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the Magician's Table offers medicine to each individual that is appropriate and just right and in affinity with wherever they are in that moment of their lives. And as such, what one receives in the Magician's Table is unpredictable, unforeseeable, and like not outcome based or prescriptive by me, certainly. It has nothing to do with me even, because everyone's receiving what it's time for them to receive. And in this way too, like what level, quote unquote, or the amount of experience someone has with giving an offering is really irrelevant, as well as the number of times you come to the Magician's Table. The Magician's Table just seems to provide what someone seeks, and also can't predict. So it's really a powerful space this way. I feel like it's a heart-opening space to help us heal the fear that we have around sharing from our heart-led gifts, and let our hearts open to others more, and to also receive heartfelt communication from others. And that in itself is like really powerful. So in many ways, it's a love space, I think, too. Those are some of the things that come through for me initially. How would y'all describe it?
Would you like to take that question, Rebecca?
I would. Yeah, that love space for sure. And I mean, what it means to me is it's meant a lot to me, to be honest. It's, not only do you have this moment of going through this witnessing and gift sharing and love sharing container that is just so nurturing as we are in these moments for ourselves. There's also, I'm sure we'll get to this, but what has happened after, the container, and how, like, I really feel like it was the only sort of real class that I took last year. And I am someone who usually takes many in a year. And it's like, it's all I needed, because it continued to take me through the experience, through even now, like I'm coming through another space. So what beautiful timing to step into this role as a 13th reader, because I feel like I'm there again too. It's like, wow, what will happen this round? Yeah, it's a profound experience. Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that experience, Rebecca, because I'm curious especially as a fellow Virgo rising, what that experience of just taking that one class was like for you, and what birthed forward for you within that experience. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, first of all, just beautiful friendships and support, and that means so much, especially, when you are stepping into this work and maybe the environment you're in is not, in quite the support that you want it to be as you're wanting to come forward with your magical gifts. So that container alone to help give you the confidence to come forward. I mean, I just haven't looked back since. It's just like, I think in another podcast, this is who I am now. And I really claim that piece for myself, coming out of that container, like immediately. And to be surprised what, did want to come forward, coming in with, the idea that I was going to be giving tarot readings, astrology readings, and coming out as giving psychic readings. So that really changed the course for me, in terms of what I offer now. And these offerings feel so much more true and authentic to me. And that was able to really come out through that experience. So when I am expressing my gifts now, they come from this really authentic and deep place. And I'm so grateful for that.
Oh,
yeah. Just really
I love hearing that. Yeah, I love that so much. I feel like what I would add to both of your answers about Magician's Table is also that it felt like a power space for me, because I think power is one of those things that we see a lot of distortions of power. We don't see examples of true power, and we don't see examples of people embodying their true powers. And so I feel in my experience at the first Magician's Table, it was really this experience of what does it look like if we just really step into our power, where we say yes to this part of us that is coming from the divine, that is connected to the divine, and we share it with others, and how power and love are so intricately connected, and that they're never separate, but we live in a society that makes us think that it's separate, right? So what does it look like to decondition from that, and then to step into your power as a form of loving yourself and loving the world and loving your community?
That is so rich. Thank you.
So beautiful. Wow. Shivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that from the experience of holding it, like I don't presume to know what Magician's Table is going to teach me this year. But certainly two of the biggest things have been trusting my channel, because I saw this on a run and just wrote it down, and then just kept following the steps to nurture it forward. And since then, that's just my business, right? But also, like, what does it mean to be a steward of something, and how much of myself do I want in a thing that's for others? And when am I holding myself back because what is called for is for me to be forward? And like, how to be a steward that's not centering herself, but also gives herself and is open-hearted to it and wants to give and receive from it at the same time. I feel like this is, with my Saturn in Leo, this is a space that I'll probably always be emergently learning from holding spaces and feeling into the kind of stewardship that feels right for me.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect segue to this idea of emergence, right? Which is really central to the Magician's Table. I'm curious to hear you both musing a little bit about what emergence means. And I'm actually kind of having a deja vu moment, Britten, because I remember in the very first Magician's Table, part of what we did was we had a conversation, the two of us, about this idea of emergence. But I think what I love so much about conversation spaces is that, no two time period is exactly the same. Like that time when I had that conversation with you about emergence was not your Saturn opposition. Rebecca wasn't here, so I'm really curious to hear what is bubbling forth in this moment for both of you around this idea of emergence and your relationship to it. Anything you feel like sharing around that?
Sure. As you know, I love the word emergent. It does change what it feels like it means to me too. As per brand. That's on brand for Emergence to emergently teach us anew every moment. But yeah, I feel like emergence feels like it has something to do with like a bubbling up from below the surface of it. Something like it has to do with revealing what is already latent or already there. And right now what it feels like is it has to do with a practice of being with aliveness, because to be with what's like coming forth feels like aliveness to me, which can be very confronting for us. So this is why I don't think emergence is necessarily easeful or something that we've been conditioned to feel great comfort with. And also aliveness has a lot to do with like deathness. So it feels like a practice of trusting in the timing of that which is alive and which dies. And I think ultimately emergence feels like a something has to do with wonder in some way to me. Like it's a wonder practice because it's so wondrous what emerges. Like it's unpredictable. And so it takes your breath away. And so I also think emergence is a practice of trust and the courage to trust in what's here.
Wow.
Yeah. And that what's here is just on time. What about y'all?
Well, yes to all of that. I think that, emergence, the word reminds me of Aries energy, and that even that transition from Pisces to Aries, there's that kind of, full cycle behind it, but the kind of magical in between birthing space that then pushes it out, into Aries. And I really feel that with emergence is the undertone, like what's underneath it to push the seed out, or even in terms of the moon cycles, like I sort of associate it with the waxing crescent moon, which was the moon I was born under. So that energy of that, like, there is that word struggle that comes in, but also that release. And then, even like with birth, even too, that there is that unknownness, but then that sort of magical thing comes out. Yeah. Where that light is coming out of the darkness, of that real magical, dark, mystical space.
Yeah.
That's sort of what it is bringing up for me.
Wow. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like for me, emergence has been this experience of allowing myself to see what I am scared to see, within myself and within others. And, in some ways, I think it's a very courageous act because I remember the first Magician's Table really felt like like we just don't know what was going to happen. I don't know if you remember that feeling, Britten. It's like, what is this? And it's like, there's the idea, right? And there's the concept, and I'm sure it lived in your imagination. And then I think in the flesh, it's always so much more complicated and more beautiful and more pungent and more bloody than you can ever think of,
Bloody, yes.
Yes.
like I think in Emergence, there's something about translation too, that, we all come to this world as beings who are able to dream, right? Like one of the features of our humanity is this ability to vision and to dream. But then as we continue to birth that dream, there's something really messy, in that process, and really not smooth about the translation, because this is making me think about Venus and Mars, like when things are in the realm of Jupiter and Mercury, in the realm of thought, in the realm of philosophy, of dreams, of hopes, they take a very expansive and embracing format. But then when they get into the realm of Mars and Venus, they have to fit into a form, right? And that form needs to sleep, that form needs to shit, that form needs to eat, and that form needs to fuck. So there's something really complicated about that relationship of being in that Mars and Venus encasing. Yeah. And I think when we think about this in terms of, being a magical person, being out in the world, sharing our gifts, we are always rubbing up against the word that I'm looking for is the umbilical cord, but I guess like the placenta of, this liminal space, right, between our vision and how it's actually received. Like when I'm thinking about, for example, the reading space, or even having a class, this is an experience that's pretty alive for us as we birth astrology as praxis, Britten. There were all these ideas about this is what the ideal thing looks like. And then we try it out, and here are all these people, breathing, thinking, doing, and it doesn't fit. And then some other things that like, wow, that really sounds like a bad idea. And then we try it and it's like, wow, this was actually the best idea. So like, I think there's something about emergence that's also about continually undermining our own ability to execute according to our expectations, and that being necessarily a good thing. Like it's not always a good thing when your expectations come to fruition, because sometimes what you needed is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of fumbling in the dark, I think.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had this whole story about the timeline of the idea, but because I keep, these huge dense journals, and I was going back, and I had started writing the words, the magician's table, and like circling it and like making little sparks off of it in my doodles, like a year and a half before my narrative of when it came to me happened. And it was like, that is like that new moon, like that you're not really seeing, and that it's like the waxing crescent that I was like, oh, I see you, here we go. But there was this whole period of just kind of swimming around like in the waters with it, that like really didn't fully connect into my consciousness until I went back and saw evidence of it in my doodles, which in doodles, are kind of an amoebic space of not fully having consciousness. So I'll just share that as an interesting play on what you're saying. You're both saying.
Yeah, I love that space.
Yes,
that dreamy. I don't know what it is yet, but it's so exciting, and it's just, a blur, but there's little pieces coming in that don't make sense, like a dream, right? How it's like doesn't make sense yet, and then you wake up and start to understand.
Yeah.
Are there any stories about emergence in your personal lives, whether that's magical or not magical, that you would like to share?
Do you want, Rebecca?
Mm. Well, I guess I'll just share that a lot of times emergence for me has been like surprising times in my life where all of a sudden, I find myself in this position of the 13th reader. I'm like, wow, how did I get here? It's such an honor for me. And I'm just so excited. Where other times where, I, as an artist, would find myself, working with another, bigger artist that I really admire and being like, wow, how did I get here? So I like that it feels that way for me through my life at this point. And maybe there's some shadow work for me to do around really owning that and coming through that. But it's been really beautiful, and they've been really some of the most amazing like markings of my life. Yeah.
What about you, Britten?
Yeah, I think that a lot of emergence the last few years, since I've been on my mystical path, shall we say, some of it has been quite mystical in the sense of early on, before I even found astrology, I started to just have these mystical pictures of myself. Like I had one just really gripping picture of me, like all in a ball. And I had these like chains on me and my ankles and wrists. And I just started to stand up, and it was like light as a feather, just like light as a feather, standing up, and all these like shackles just fall off. And I just like kind of just stood up, and I just saw myself like enwrapped in gold light. And it was so astonishing to me at the time. But at the time, I didn't know anything about goddesses, or like it felt like goddess energy. And so I just like, I'm going to follow this. I think I'm supposed to be learning about goddesses, and just like set about finding teachers who would help me connect with goddess frequencies. And that led to this, and then to this. And there's been a lot of different things, like where a vision comes in and it's shocking. And then I just follow it. It feels like the homework most down to the earth that I could actually do something about. And so following the ridiculous, or like the preposterous, or the impossible, the irrational, has been actually, I think, pretty important to emergent moves in my life. But also Mars Venus type things of following irritations and annoyances and frustrations as really important information, and following like excitements and like I can't stop thinking about this as really important information to help me just keep going on something that I don't understand, and I don't know what it means, and I don't even know how to talk about it necessarily. So yeah, I feel like a lot of my anecdotes have those traits.
Something that I'm hearing from both of you here is this idea of surprise, actually, a little bit, that I think there's something about emergence too that is about leaving behind a template that we've used to see ourselves and to put ourselves and to treat ourselves, and to begin saying yes to the next chapter of the assignment, That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, that there's something about saying yes to maybe a foreign or alien or unknown way of being with yourself. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's what feels magical, is the surprise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Which takes us to this idea of the magician, which, you know, I'm thinking, since we're talking about the magician's table, why not also talk about the magician as a card and as an energy and as an archetype? Yeah, what's alive currently for both of you around the magician, and how the magician is showing up in your life? How what kind of relationship do you both have with the magician?
I would say I just love the magician so much because I think it's carrying this energy from the Fool that is really audacious, like nearly ridiculous, to just be in front of oneself and other people in one's gifts. Like being seen doing your gifts, whether those gifts are to inspire or to challenge or to delight, to heal, whatever it is. Just like, I'm just going to stand here and do this. Even if people don't like it, like, I have to. There's something there that's just like so beautiful. I was just like, being in my channel is what I must do. Being connected to my tools and my gifts is what I must do. And letting doubt and fear burn away by being so in your gifts and letting them move through you, that that's all you can do, you know. And that is quite a thing. And I think it truly makes new reality. Because I think in the channel, we each receive information about a new reality we're creating, and that continues to break us out of stale paradigms or harmful paradigms. So I think there's this kind of mercurial, like, portal opening potential in these like little maneuvers. I think of like Mercury being small, like, and being able to kind of adjust quickly. These maneuvers have power to change worlds. And I just think that that's about as inspiring as anything. So I love the magician, and I love seeing the magician in other people. I love feeling the magician in myself. And it's so alive, being at the edge of that number one. And yeah, it's what I want to do in this world, is to be in it and feel it from other people. It's the best.
Beautiful. Yes to all of that. Wow. Oh, geez. Yeah, and what you're saying, Britten, is reminding me of, Jonathan, your words of coming into your power, right? And really, when I see the card, it's like, there's the infinity loop above the magician's head, and there's the wand, as above, so below, and then the table of the tools, the elements. So it's like it's got this one stepping into your fullness, and carrying the energy from Uranian energy from the Fool. So it's got this electric, mercurial sense that I feel pushes the vibration out further. And it makes me think about, what if, and so I think about this with the magician's table as supporting, folks within their own gifts. What if we all stood as magicians? Like, what is that vibration? What would happen? And it's just so powerful in the ways that, I do feel that we have come here with certain gifts to put them out into the world for betterment, of like helping one another and really manifesting something way beyond our expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like in this world, we carry such grief at this lie that we don't have gifts, or that we don't have magic, or that we don't have a channel, or that what we have to share doesn't matter, or doesn't belong, or doesn't have a place. Like, this is a deep grief. And I know the healing potential of it from watching people bloom when they tap into what they naturally already always have, and this is how it's world changing, is because as people access it, they land inside of their full power, which takes us back to this power idea. It is a power place that comes from just being in touch with your own spirit and what it's here to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's powerful. I feel like something that I was also hearing from what you both were saying, but specifically I think you were using the word "what if," Rebecca, and I think there's something really powerful about holding that potential, and almost I think part of magic is also in giving it a chance, right? Like, what if we give it a chance to exist in the world? What if we give it a chance to be true in our lives and see then what bubbles forward from that? Because I think we also come from this overculture of needing evidence in order to quote unquote believe something or to live by something. But as we know, as magical people, often it's the other way around, right? Like, and I think this is not just limited to us magical people, by the way. You know this very well, Rebecca, as an artist too, that the creation doesn't come without the vision, right? So first, saying yes to the vision, believing the vision, whatever that word means, right? Because sometimes believing the vision means putting 80 hours on the painting, right? Or on the piece of music. That, to me, is as much a belief in a vision as proclaiming and getting up on stage and saying, I believe, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be so evangelical in a way. It can also be in a very deeply embodied, very Eight of Pentacles, Virgo way as well. And I think there's something really powerful in then voting or saying yes to an idea, saying to the idea that, I believe in you through our actions and our time and how we choose to spend our life force. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. And when you say yes to that, like, what happens? That's when it starts.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So exciting. Yeah.
I would love to hear from both of you about this round of Magician's Table, and in terms of hopes and dreams and and in terms of what you would hope people to gain from it, what comes forward from that space of the 11th house shared hopes and dreams for you? Mm-hmm.
I'll add that what I'm always hoping is that each person trusts in what comes forward for them in the process, including doubt, including terror, like including all the things, like trusting that whatever comes up is that which is there for them to love themselves and love where they are. Mm-hmm. And trusting that, like, if there's a path of emergence, it's not like something that's away from them that they have to go find. That, like, this emergence that is available all the time, whether or not you're in this container, is one that's right here where we are. And so it's really just about being present and participating and listening where you are now. And trusting that everyone's path is going to look completely different. And it's not a comparative space or competitive endeavor. There's no wrong way to do it. We're just showing up however we're doing in a given day. Mm-hmm. And so, like, to me, what I hope for anyone who comes in and signs up is that they feel full of their own, all of it, like their own joys and heartbreaks and grief and fear and love and dream and all the things that are part of aliveness. Mm-hmm. And whatever comes up for each person is really, I don't think of it as my business, because the outcome is not a thing that, like, anyone can foretell or promise of an experience like this. So it's really about learning that it's okay to trust in one's emergent process and in timing. Those are first thoughts. What about you, Rebecca?
Yeah. Well, it's actually bringing me to a moment that I had within the Magician's Table this past year. And there was this moment of, like, total dissolve feeling. And it was fearful for me. But I was able to express that in the container and to be, like, witness for this moment of, like, not knowing who I was. Like, I had to go to that moment to then come through the other side and being like, oh, I'm surprised by this is the thing, But that moment is the place of embodiment for me, that I really, wanted to feel it and needed to feel it. And to be witnessed in that moment felt so supportive for me to move through it. So I guess I just want to share that if there's anyone who is maybe feeling fearful about, feels attracted to the experience, but maybe is feeling, a little nervous or scared, that it's just, it's such a beautiful, loving space. And so, when I think of it as the 12th house, like, I hope that I can bring this limitless space of love. And I'm so excited to witness people and to each individual see what comes up for them, because it is different, and you never know, even at the end, if you are still not knowing, like, it just doesn't matter. because there's something magical happening underneath the surface. So that's kind of what's coming up for me there. And I hope people join, like the ones that are feeling really aligned to it, because I can't wait. It's going to be so exciting. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking with 3 from last year's Magician's Table for Moon to Moon, and they were describing the experience as like a series of ledges, of like precipices, to maneuver. And the most difficult one, or the scariest one, was filling the application out and clicking submit. Like that was the biggest one of all. Is saying I'm going to belong to this.
Yeah.
I can do it. And then everything after that was like mini ledges. But the next biggest one apparently is the 5 minutes before you're going to get on your Zoom call with your first partner. And you're like, I'm going to have to do this. Does that resonate?
Yes. Yeah. But then you get rolling and you just laugh at yourself for the first time, because it's just so normal by the end, or you're just so used to it. Oh, it's funny. So true.
I love that. I feel like what I will add to, as maybe potentially being the most nerve-wracking one for me, is actually towards the end. Like this idea of like, oh, this container is ending, and I'm graduating from this container in some shape or form. What do I do now? I think that's always, I was just telling Rebecca yesterday that for me, the experience of being the 13th reader in the first year definitely required, setting up the stage and then like the performance. And then I had to set some time aside to really break down the stage afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I really appreciate that, Jonathan.
Yeah, that process took me like a couple months at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I liked the timing of when it ended, because then it sort of took us right into summer, and you're sort of in more of that energy of Cancer. So it was like really nice to kind of come off and then have that time to like be in, for me, summer, but that energy of, caring and feeling to process. Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's a life skill, right, in practicing working with expectation about like what emergence looks like, what it looks like this year, what it looks like next year, what it looks like next to your friend's emergence, like holding yourself with holding your expectation, or what some part of you thought it would look like, and then holding what's actually here is I imagine a large thing that one is learning in the container, which is then something to take with you forever, everywhere you go, because we're always working with that.
Yeah. I have a final question for both of you, which is, I'm curious to hear, what do you feel your next process of emergence will look like in kind of an oracular way? Whether that be through Magician's Table or otherwise. I mean, that certainly is included in the fabric of your reality in the next few months, but I'm curious to hear, what comes up around this idea of emergence and your next phase of emergence.
Do you have one, Rebecca?
Yes. Well, if I just go into the oracular part, I mean, I and there's this desire as well, but I'm going to be vulnerable and share this here of like I want to emerge as this fertile goddess.
Mm.
I want it to be feminine and nurturing, like almost to the overtop degree, and like have that be almost like exploding out of me. This is very in that space, but like and that's to do with like my art practice. Like I want to create these creations that they're so feminine it hurts. It's like I can't handle it. It's so there's so much beauty. It's like oozing. And how that ties into Magician's Table, I'm not sure yet. And I'm here for this desire that's been with me for a while, and see what emerges through this container around that. And what's actually coming in right now is interesting. Maybe even I need some Mars energy in there to help, push that through. So yeah. Yeah, that's what's alive for me right now when you ask me that. Thank you, Jonathan.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing.
Rebecca, I'm so excited to see what emerges for your in the workshop aspect of the container. Yeah.
Thank you, Brittany. Me too.
Yeah, I feel like what's emerging for me is I just want to continue to be deeper and deeper into my channel of creativity and sharing, and just like my absolute mad love affair with all of it. And as things come up where I'm afraid about money, or I'm afraid about overwhelm, or I'm afraid about like I can't handle it all, I just keep coming back to my love and my joy, because I'm learning so much about like what gets in the way of just pure joy, and letting people into my containers like really in. And so holding all the parts of myself that feel terrified of repatterning. But yeah, as I want to hold more, I have all the parts that are like overwhelm, like so it's like that's where I'm working, is like trusting that I have support and love, and that I can hold so much more than I think I can, but I don't mean that in an overworking kind of way or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wow. Thank you both. This has been so magical. We knew it was going to be magical, but I really love having a conversation with both of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
All right, that is it for my conversation with Britten and Rebecca. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I hope that you found something inspiring, something thought-provoking, something healing from that conversation. I certainly was very buzzy after that conversation. And if you feel a resonance, I know that in the conversation we actually never ended up talking about the Magician's Table, in terms of logistics, right? But I would direct you to Britten's podcast, Moon to Moon, as well as her Instagram for more information, and also obviously the web page for the Magician's Table for this year, the course page. If you are interested, if you are feeling that resonance, I would highly recommend that you check out the details, right? The Virgoan details in all of the different ways. And also, Britten is someone who I always love watching Britten move through this process of talking about her course before enrollment is open, because there's just something so magical about her energy in that space. So I recommend that you check it out. And yeah, if you feel called to it, definitely recommend applying for the Magician's Table. All right. If you have been enjoying this podcast, if you've been enjoying this episode, I would love it if you could consider leaving a review. 5-star reviews are always so appreciated. And as I've been saying to people, it doesn't have to be long. Literally, you can support this podcast in 5 minutes by writing 2 or 3 sentences describing your experience listening to this podcast and receiving the wisdom that my guests and I are sharing through this medium, which is one of my favorite mediums to show up in. And yeah, I would also appreciate it if you could share it with members of your community if you feel a resonance. And yeah, until next time, I hope that you take good care of yourselves, and I'm sending you so much love. Thank you so much for being here.